What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. I'm your host, TJ Zwarych. Feels like I haven't been here in a while because we're down to one main Agents of Fandom show a week, and I'm not hosting the Comic Corner. So while the fans, the viewers, still get lots of W.L.F throughout the week, I haven't been here personally since last Monday. So it feels weird, but I'm happy to be back on chatting about this wonderful show, The Last of Us, which has now come to the conclusion of season 2. We got a few years to wait now for any new episodes of The Last of Us. Helping me break it down as per usual, we got Sean Mott, Metalcore Nerds. How you doing, Sean?
Doing great, man. Here on this American holiday Monday. I watched the episode at like 1 o'clock in the morning last night. We'll get into that later, but yeah, ready to talk about this, break it down, and see what everyone else thinks about it.
It was a polarizing episode, I will say, according to the internet. The internet seems very divided. The fandom seems very divided, as I think they have been throughout a large portion of season 2. But we're not breaking this down alone. We're gonna have our own little debate here on the podcast, and to help us analyze, break it down. And I couldn't agree more with what Dave Wilkins saying in chat, which I'm not mistaken, is our guest co-host on the Hometown Ghost Stories podcast, and he says whatever Rob says is wrong. And I agree. Rob
I don't
Coakley
agree.
is going to be giving us some wrong takes today, if he's disagreeing with me. How you doing,
well, Rob? I had to come on because myself, you, and Rich, who's been on the show as well before, had a little group chat going last night. We were all fired up, and I had to make sure that the right opinions were laid out on the show today. So that's why I'm here.
Typically, Rob and I love to go back and forth, argue, disagree. And last episode, we just kind of agreed on everything, so it didn't work out too well. And then not only that, but I got the wonderful opportunity to go hang out on the Hometown Ghost Stories podcast, chat about a movie as well. And guess what? Rob and I agreed there too. So it's not that we are breaking our typical mold, and I think we may be getting back to it today. But before we talk about The Last of Us, I want to know what you're watching. Let us know in chat what you've been watching, reading, listening to. And I want to know what you've been watching as well, Sean and Rob. I'll start first. I have finished The Studio on Apple TV Plus. Really, really enjoyed the final 2 episodes for that one. It took me a while to really, I think, fully embrace it and enjoy it as much as others have, because there's a lot of the kind of like cringe comedy where I get a bad secondhand embarrassment where it's like, this guy's doing something so stupid. It's killing me. Why are you doing this? I don't want to watch this. But I grew to love the characters, grew to love the story, and I think the final 2 episodes were my 2 favorites of the whole season. So can't wait to get more and more seasons of this show. Sean, how about you? What you been watching?
Richie brings up Murderbot. I have seen all of Murderbot, and shameless plug, there's a Murderbot review on Agents of Fandom by me. It's a pretty fun show. I've seen the whole thing, and it's a very strange thing to kind of dive into because it's a sci-fi comedy, and with so much like hard sci-fi coming out, especially like this year and the past year, it feels kind of like a massive tonal shift just watching it. And especially seeing Alexander Skarsgård in a role like that, where he's this like awkward humanesque android. But it is a really fun like palate cleanser type series for sure. I did see Lilo and Stitch in theaters, and it was pretty good. Like, I'll say it got me emotionally pretty good. It definitely is kind of clunky as far as some of the editing and stuff like that. But Stitch is adorable and looks great in live action. So adorable and cute. I saw it already made $300 million in the box office. That movie, that's an easy billion. I saw a few people be like, why do they keep remaking these? And I was like, every live action Disney thing, almost most live action Disney things have made over $1 billion. That's why they keep making these things. You're not going to stop making money. Like, what do you mean? Like, if you produce something that made $1 billion, even if you thought it sucked, I'm sure you would still keep making them. Just saying. Other than that, we were talking before this last night. We were going to do this right after the episode aired, but then my wife Sam and I got hired to cover an insane clown posse show. Which, if I don't know if the Agents of Fandom listeners probably know what ICP is, but if you don't, Google it and then come back to me later. Maybe watch the American Juggalo documentary. You'll come back a changed person. Basically, it's these two white dudes who are rappers and they wear clown face makeup, and their fan base is called Juggalos. And if you've ever went like people watching at like a fair or something, times that by like 20, and that's what this show was. I felt like I stepped into an alternate dimension and I lived there for hours. They have their own wrestling thing called Juggalo Championship Wrestling. There was a whole wrestling thing happening before the show. Pretty wild stuff. It was pretty great. it was pretty great. So this was going to happen last night, but that's why this is happening today.
When you say you were hired to cover the Insane Clown Posse, do you mean like as a journalist break down the concert, or do you mean as a musician you were covering them? You were the Insane Clown Posse last night. Like, which one was it?
That would have been awesome. No, it's mostly there's a few promotion companies I work for, but sometimes through the Metal Corners podcast, we'll cover shows, as in like take live photos, do video and video content and stuff like that, and it'll be for the site. And this time there'll be some Insane Clown Posse pictures from Sam on metalcorners.com probably in the next few days. But she got hired by the promoter to shoot content to promote the show. It was sold out, 1,800 people there in this crazy venue that's sort of indoor, sort of outdoors. It's kind of a pavilion, but in the winter they can fully enclose it and stuff. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it was wild. But that is a funny thing. That would be insane if I got hired to just be a member of ICP for a night. I would probably do that.
Like that's you. Like, for those who don't know, you do that as well. You have shows where you're a cover guy. You guys, you're a band who covers other bands' songs at times. And so for a second I was like, wait a minute, are you like covering it like we covered shows, or are you like putting on the makeup, putting on the face paint, and doing some rapping? That would have been pretty funny. Rob, how about you? What you been watching?
So last weekend, Hometown Ghost Stories went and did an investigation in 3 different locations in Iowa and Kansas. So I've been watching back a lot of that footage right now. That's been my life. Other than that, the only other thing I've really watched is Clown in a Cornfield since I've been on the show, which was, it's like a introductory slasher for like, if you think your kids are ready for slashers, like that's the one I would start them with, type of deal. So fun.
Gateway slasher.
Yeah, gateway slasher is perfectly worded, is what I would say. So it was like a fun movie. It wasn't great by any means. It's forgettable fun is what I will say. But that's about it. Like, I mean, I was doing Black Mirror. Still haven't been able to finish that yet. Hoping to get through that this week. Just a lot of ghost stuff.
I also watched Fountain of Youth on Apple TV Plus, which was definitely hoping it was going to be better, but I still had fun. Like, it is certainly not like a great or even good movie by any means, but it's a movie that I think if you kind of go into it with no expectations and just want to, have a fun, silly little story, it still can have some enjoyment be found in it, even though it's not very high quality. Like, I struggle to ever see John Krasinski in anything other than like silly, goofy guy role. And he at least had some of that in this role. He still kind of was supposed to be the leading man hunk, which I don't really view John Krasinski as, but he had enough goofiness in it that it kind of worked for me. You know,
That's
if you got
that's runner-up Captain America to you, sir.
runner-up Captain America, runner-up Reed Richards, runner-up.
Yeah, it's so hard because like I feel like he made his name being like the awkward normal guy. You know, like that's why so many people gravitated towards Jim on The Office. Is like he feels, and obviously he's like a good looking dude, but like he's not like Brad Pitt or anything, you know, he's not Ryan Gosling. To put it in comparison, I guess that's kind of strange. And I know he's on the Jack. I mean, I think that's why I never connected with the Jack Ryan series, where I was like, I don't believe John Krasinski in this role. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know.
That's kind of the exact same with me. I not only did he was Jim on The Office for a long time, where so many of us saw him as that, but he also just kind of perfectly embodies the guy who, have you ever worked at like a restaurant or like some sort of small company where maybe it's you, maybe it's somebody else, maybe it's like a teacher in a school. They seem really, really cool compared to everybody else there. You know, when you're in the office, when you're in this small little workplace, that's the cool guy. But when you bring them out into the world and especially place them around movie stars, they all of a sudden just seem very just like blah. That's kind of how I feel about him, where it's like he plays the cool guy in a not cool place so well. But as soon as you put him next to the other cool guys, all of a sudden I don't really get the same vibe from him anymore. But alas, Fountain of Youth on Apple TV Plus. You can find our review up on agentsfandom.com from Ethan Simi. If you got nothing else going on, you just want a fun little adventure story, it is absolutely that. But don't go into it expecting a overly strong movie by any means.
You really sold me on it, TJ. I cannot wait to go watch it.
Yeah, go watch The Studio on Apple TV Plus. You can pretty much guarantee if you start a television show on Apple TV Plus, it's going to be one of the best things you've ever seen. And if you start a movie, it's probably going to be below average. You know, it's going to be fine. Like The Gorge, you know? The Gorge?
It's fine.
Sure, it was fine.
Very fine. Very fine.
But not really, just not kind of a whole lot to it. Carlos popping into chat wondering if we're talking about Fountain of Youth. Yes, we are. I know Carlos was very much not a fan of it. I think I'm a little higher on it than he was, but yeah, not an overly great film. But the people are here not to hear us talk about Fountain of Youth. They are here to chat about The Last of Us Season 2, which after only 7 episodes has now come to a close. Sean, keep it spoiler free. Thoughts on the season as a whole?
I really liked this season a lot. And as I've said, like week in and week out, I'm very familiar with the game. I love the game. It's like one of my favorite things. And as I've said before, to compare the two is fine. And I think comparatively, obviously, I would say I like the game more, but it's such a hard thing. You're so much more immersed in the game than you are in the series. But as far as like adaptation and TV goes, I think this was a really good, strong season of television with some really great acting. I was worried the finale would feel rushed, and surprisingly, it didn't for me. Obviously, that can kind of, whoever you are, that is going to vary. But I actually was shocked of how I was like, okay. And the show continued to do what I think it does best, is it takes these moments to slow down and expand the characters more. And I was kind of worried about the whole Jesse thing, knowing what's coming, being like, man, I wish we had more time with him. And I think this episode did take some moments to kind of step back and really enhance his character more than they kind of even did in the game. So for that's what I appreciate the show for, is that they took time with these characters to kind of expand on things more and make things a little more nuanced. And for The Last of Us is supposed to be an exploration of the gray, to showcase that there is no black and white of humanity. There is no really good and evil. There can be people who do good things and people do bad things, but there's people that just do both. And that's just kind of how humanity is. And I think they explored that more in the show than I think you probably could in a game, because there's certain things, even narratively, even though I think the story of The Last of Us Part 2 is incredible, there's just certain things you can't do because you're handcuffed to the medium. And it's probably the same with TV too. I just think I'm glad both exist. I guess it's the greatest thing I can say, that I'm happy both exist. And I just like, I am okay with differing opinions and having critiques, but some of these, what people are saying, aren't even critiques. It's people just yelling at a wall, being like, it's different, I hate it. And that I just think is really stupid. And that's it.
I think
If you have qualms, I get it. But
I think it speaks to the popularity of The Last of Us, with how many people are watching this show, how many people are talking about it, because you get that when anything becomes popular enough, right? Like, it was not everyone had played the game. This was a brand new season 1. And so, like, you're obviously always going to get your people who like something, dislike something, have valid reasons for liking it, valid reasons for critiquing it. But the bigger something gets, you're eventually going to hit that point of, Star Wars, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that people are going to have shit to say about absolutely anything. And so it does get more difficult the bigger something gets to weed past the trolls and the goofballs, the silly geese,
true,
as it were, to get to the proper critiques, the proper breakdowns. Rob, what were your thoughts on season 2?
Hi, my name's Rob, and I'm here to talk some shit today. But to start with my overall thoughts of season 2, I thought it was a really good season. I thought it bordered on great at times. I thought they made some really good choices, to the point that Sean made. They really enhanced a couple of these characters. Dina, we've already talked it to death, but enhancing her character from what she was in the game was massive to me. I really liked everything they did with that character. Enhancing Jesse's character was really well done as well. There was a few other characters here and there that you got a little more with. They made some changes from the game to the show that I really liked. They made a few that I didn't like, and now they've made a few that I've outright hated. So I think it was a good season. I think it was a solid season. I think it bordered on great. And then I'll talk about what I didn't like in a little bit. But it's not irredeemable, maybe. I don't know. I have so much to say. My overall thoughts are, it's good. 7 episodes is weird. It's a weird number to do for a season. I thought that was odd. But yeah, I think it's a good, close to great, fumbled season. It's my overall thoughts.
Carlos has a thought in chat that if I'm not mistaken, is probably going to be something you elaborate on a little bit, Rob. And he said some of the deviations in the story make Ellie's single mind revenge quest seem ridiculous in a way the game does not. And I feel like you had not the same, but like kind of a same school of thoughts to get to some of the changes later on that we get to. But let's start diving into this episode. We will do a full spoiler warning now. If you have not seen The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 7, get your ass out of here and go watch the episode. Come back, join us once you have seen it. I was planning on doing like a brand new, all new segment for this episode of the podcast today. And there's something new that I want to do, is essentially 90s movie trailer recaps is my idea for a new segment on the podcast, where if we're breaking down an episode, I'll make a script and do like a previously on, maybe sometimes we do a Dragon Ball Z style. Maybe sometimes we do a Bruce Buffer boxing announcer style. Maybe sometimes it's just classic 90s trailer. I do want to add that in, but I just did not have time to get everything all done and ready for it for today. So that sounds like that'll start with the next show that we begin covering. But Sean, we get a complete tonal shift right away in this episode, because all of last episode we have, for the most part, happy flashbacks, right? We end with the porch scene. The final scene of the game ends up being in the penultimate of season 2. But for the most part, it's like a upbeat, fairly happy episode as we have all of these flashbacks. And it kind of makes you forget that Ellie just tortured the shit out of Nora 2 episodes ago. And like from a timeline perspective, that's like right where
Right
we
after.
are
Yeah.
here. And so the episode is titled Convergence. And we get back at the theater. Dina's got an arrow through her leg. We'll get to that part later on. But essentially, how did you feel about the tonal shift of this episode coming in from flashbacks to, okay, now we got to hit the ground running and end this thing?
Yeah, I was kind of, anticipating it because I know where the story goes, and I was like, I know what Seattle Day 3 entails, so I was definitely ready for it. I've been honestly kind of my new tactic with talking about The Last of Us is I've been kind of searching out to people who haven't played the game, and I've been making posts being like, "Hey, if you haven't played the game, I want to know what you think of the finale," and that's one thing I want to ask about is how they felt going from 6 to 7, because it is a very big tonal shift. For us, we're kind of just like, yeah, we get it. They just put all the flashbacks in one episode. I get why they did it narratively, whatever. We're kind of ready for that tonal shift. But I am curious to what like people who haven't played the game, who don't know what's coming, like how they felt about it. But me, I was prepared. I'm ready. I was ready to. I was like, I know it's coming. This is going to be a dark episode, probably one of the darkest of the series, probably entirely. So I was ready, ready to go.
Rob, how about you? Were you thrown off at all by the tonal shift of going straight from, hey, look at this, let's take you to space, to, oh my god, oh my god?
No. I mean, we knew, like, even if you didn't play the games, you know what this show is by now, right? So you knew that they were giving you your little happy haha time in season 6 just to punch you in the gut in episode 7. You weren't getting sunshine and rainbows on episode 7. You don't after you get a episode like episode 6. So I think if anyone was expecting anything different, we may need to do a temperature check on them to make sure that they're not coming down with some sort of weird fever. We knew shit was going to hit the fan. Like you have to at this point. Like you got your flashback. We're not going into other flashbacks at this point. We need to resolve what happened 2 episodes before. So I think it was just obvious that that's what we're getting into here.
Ellie is admitting what she has done to Nora. Kind of seems like not second guessing herself, but like she's visibly kind of shook about what's going on. Dina, Jesse's finally cluing in at this point of what's going on with Dina and that she is pregnant because he's trying to do some first aid on her and she doesn't want to take a swig of the alcohol. But Rob, the most interesting kind of part of this, I think, is that as Dina realizes, and Jesse's been saying it, but as Dina realizes, like, they have stepped into the middle of a fucking war, and this is not just their revenge chase anymore. They're stepping into a war that they had absolutely no part of. She wants to go home, and Ellie kind of seems like she's somewhat on board.
Well, she wants to go home, but she also wants to go home because she realized that she wasn't given the full context of why they were going there. So you get that scene where you get the look from her on top of the fact that there's an insane war going on. Chances are the people they're going after are probably going to perish in this war that's going on to begin with, because it's so violent, it's so brutal, it's so deadly. Why would you insert yourself as a third party here? And so, like, you have so many reasons to not be there now if you're Dina. Jesse already had no reason to be there, like in terms of him going. Dina was doing it for reasons that she found out were not the reasons she thought she was doing it for. And you are doing a whole, like, the there's no chutzpah to go finish this mission now, unless you're Ellie, who was just one track minded, and we're already sort of seeing her waver a little bit, like you said, which I think is kind of a mistake. We'll talk about that later. And it's just time for them to leave. Like they should be wanting to leave at this point. There's no point. They should want to get Tommy and get the hell out of there, because it's a place that nothing good can happen at this point. There's 4 of them and endless numbers on the other 2 sides for all they know. So it's the deck is stacked against them. Why are they still there? Let's get the hell out of there. There's a lot more going on than just revenge at this point. So totally get it from Dina.
Sean, what's your take on the situation? And then lead us into the extended look we kind of have at the W.L.F and at Isaac. I kind of find it interesting how Isaac's chase to find Abby and to bring her back in, it kind of reminds, like, they're not the same characters in the same situation, but I sort of feel like, what's Tommy's wife's name again? Maria. I kind of feel like Jesse is to Maria as Abby is to Isaac, where it's like this is the heir to the leadership role. And not everybody else doesn't necessarily see that of Abby, but Isaac wants her to be the one that takes over. And that is kind of the driving force of him wanting to get her back, even though she's been missing.
Yeah, I think one of the, like, thinking more about the whole season as a whole, I think one of the biggest critiques I could give it is I think them interweaving things from, obviously season 3 is going to be Abby's perspective. Them weaving in things was done the best probably this episode. And they did do it throughout the season, but I kind of wish they did it more for it to feel more cohesive, I guess. I like how they've been introducing things, like we saw the scars, we saw more of the W.L.F stuff with Isaac. I liked how they were doing that. I kind of wish they had it with more of a narrative purpose, more of than just like an introduction of just here's this thing. I wish they kind of weaved it in with more of like Abby's crew involved. And I think that maybe would have made things a little better. That's probably my biggest critique of this season, is I wish they did that better, because I think they did it in this episode very well. Because the only Abby stuff you really hear is kind of from Ellie's perspective of her looking for Abby, and I wish there was more of that. Like even that little glimpse you see, which is pretty much straight from the game, of like Mel and Owen talking about Abby, like that's like a little indicator if you're really paying attention to like what's going to come. And that made kind of how the shift of season 3 is going to be more interesting, stuff like that. And I think that was missing throughout that stuff. As far as the Dina Ellie interaction, I liked how it was pretty much a moment from the game, but they switched it with her revealing like why they're there. And obviously in the series, Dina has much more of a reason to go. She had much more of a relationship with Joel. So she felt like she was in on this act of vengeance with Ellie just as much as she was. But now knowing the real reason, and I think reality fully sinking into Dina's mind finally of, I'm pregnant. I just got shot in the leg with an arrow. And now I'm figuring out, oh, we're just doing the same thing they did. Yeah, we got to go. And I kind of like that turn, because it's kind of that moment in the game's almost, I wouldn't say like a bonding moment, but they like fall asleep together and stuff. And it's kind of like it was more of like Dina consoling Ellie, for Ellie kind of first starting to kind of hate the actions she's doing, not be deterred from vengeance, but kind of realizing what she's doing is still wrong. And not that the series missed on that. I liked the Dina part. I don't know if I loved the Ellie part. Like I didn't hate it either, but I really liked how Dina kind of came to reality finally. It was like, yeah, we need to go. And like I said, the Isaac stuff I loved, because I love, he's like, I did think some of the dialogue was a little weird when she's like, what do you want to be with her or something? That was kind of a weird line. I don't understand why they did that. I don't think that was needed narratively. I do like how he explained, like, yeah, because I don't think, do they do that in the game? I'm kind of in the Abby stuff in the game. I'm in like the middle of it. So I don't remember if is she supposed to be the one who takes over for Isaac? That I do not remember.
It's been a while. I feel like I remember something in passing, like
I think
that hints at it.
I think it was a lot more like she's such a great warrior. She's such like a crucial member of this team, but I don't think it was like she is the one that's going to lead us one day. I don't think it was like quite that obvious that that's what he was getting at.
That's what I thought too. So that's a cool addition too, and obviously it kind of makes up for, you know, the lack of Caitlin Deaver being a fucking pro wrestler, you know, for lack of better terms, which I think is fine. Like if she is a smart, you know, capable person, obviously insanely ruthless, as we saw in episode 2. I think that kind of makes up for that in a way. Like, and that's the thing is like, I know people are so hung up on appearances, but like appearances don't make character. The attributes of the character make the character. So whatever, that's fine. So that part I liked. I liked how there was emphasis on like Abby is important. Again, I kind of wish that was kind of included more in this season. I that's like a thing. Like now I'm talking about it, thinking about it more. That's like probably my biggest problem with this season.
And I think they could have done that because they come in and they give you a reveal that you don't get till later in the game, like right away, but why they're there. So I think that by doing that would have allowed them to weave in a little bit here and there. It didn't need to go crazy with it, but I mean, I just feel like you're just like, because we play the game, we sort of know some of the stuff, but just trying to follow it from the TV show perspective, to your point, some of it just felt sort of thrown in, and you're like, well, all right, well, what the hell's happening if I don't know who these people are, like off the top of the head? So I think that's a great point.
It didn't impact my enjoyment of the viewing of this season, but Rob, this is something that we were talking a little bit in that group chat with Rich, who of course joined us for an earlier episode, and he made the point that I think it's gonna, like, he's holding back judgment until he kind of sees how they stick the landing. But I think they made their job a lot tougher for next season the way they told the story in this season. I'm not necessarily saying that it will be bad by any means. And Sean, you brought up this point, I think it was on social media the other day, of like people were worried that they wouldn't come back and watch, like the viewers wouldn't come back in the same droves after Pedro Pascal died because that's who they wanted to see. Well, since he died, it's still been the #1 show on television in terms of viewership. And so I do think that this show has garnered enough fans that, and it's high enough quality that it will still have lots of viewers in season 3. But I do fear a little bit that because they really haven't set up Abby much at all since the beginning, if a full season centered around her and her story, you know, if they do a good job, once people buy into it, I'm sure it'll be, you know, lots of people watching it as it has been this season. But I think they made their job way tougher than it needed to be going into season 3, because you really, really have to make sure Abby's story is compelling. And I think there's probably a particular character that gets introduced that is going to be the, you know, emotional focal point that people are cheering for. Because I do worry that there's not going to be enough to cheer for in that 3rd season of like, we're following a character you want to win, because I'm not sure that we'll get that from Abby in season 3.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to introduce that other character right away.
Yeah,
because you because of everything you just said. So it's, yeah, I agree with that completely. They've really, I think they've really shoehorned themselves, and I think the other way they've shoehorned themselves is trying to make this 4 seasons. I think that's a problem.
That I understand, because obviously season 3, because and that's the thing is, maybe it's weird because maybe it's hard to do the last part of the game in a full season, and it might just be shorter episodes, which kind of sucks. But like, I don't think you can like tie that on as like a 1 or 2 episode thing. Like it's almost like too long narratively to make it as like an end of a season, but it's also like too short to make a full season. That's like the hard part. I think the big thing they have with season 3 is that the Abby story is the best part of the game. And there's a lot of really big set pieces and a lot of big kind of moments in that part that I think will be able to carry the season. But that it is a thing where it's like, I think people will care because I think people are just like bought into The Last of Us. And that's kind of when I was like, hey, non-game players, are you like in for season 3? It's been kind of mostly like people are stoked, and then non-game player or game players are also commenting saying they really liked it. So that's cool too, I guess, to see that side. But I think if people actually just watch it and let the story play out, because it was way worse in the game. They gave you nothing about Abby, basically, other than, she killed Joel. And then you're just like, bam, you're playing as her. And that's kind of how everyone went. Everyone's like, really? What the fuck? And then as the game went on, you're like, oh, wow, this is actually incredible. So I think if people go and just watch it, because I don't believe people when they're like, I'm going to stop watching. I really don't, especially when it's a show like this. This is a water cooler show. Everyone's talking about it, and you don't want to be excluded in those conversations. That's just like, that's how water cooler TV shows work. So I feel like people, even, it's like people saying they're not going to watch the last season of Stranger Things. Like, if you've watched the other seasons, you're going to watch it. There's no way you're not going to watch it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. You're going to watch it. I am bummed we're going to have to wait 2 years for it, but it's the same thing with like The Boys. We've had to wait like 2 years between every season of The Boys, and then every season is like still insanely watched and good to great. So I don't know. It's hard to like tackle those conversations because it's like no one really has the right answer or not. But I think and I only see them nailing this, well, at least for the most part, nailing the Abby story. Like, they've obviously shown they can do a good job adapting this stuff, not without its faults or anything, but for the most part, they can reproduce the story in a very enticing way. And there's a lot to that part that I think is going to make really good television. I just think that's why I haven't told people. Like, I did have a friend who was kind of like, the ending was kind of dumb. Like, why would I want to watch an Abby season? And I'm like, dude, just watch it. Like,
it's a big ask,
really
though.
good.
It's such a big ask. And this is just a problem with television as a whole for waiting 2 years for seasons now. But your point with The Boys, yeah, I mean, every season's been great with The Boys, but you're coming back to those characters, and now you're asking me to wait 2 years, and I'm expecting to turn on and see at least a character that I'm like a fan of, and I'm not going to see them basically at all. So now you're telling me,
right,
I'm waiting 4 years probably for that resolution. Like, it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's a big ask of your audience to take that leap with you. So,
and it was less of a big deal from season 1 to season 2 because you can have that big gap because the story was completed.
Right.
The story was done at the end of season 1. You were beginning a new story. Whereas this is like you're telling the same story, but from a different perspective. And so I really think they should have filmed this back to back. It kind of shocked me when I realized production had not even started for season 2 yet. Or season 3 yet, sorry. Like, to me, this should have been a very clear, you're filming these at the exact same time.
Back to back. Yeah.
It's the same set locations, just at different periods of time. Like, film these back to back. I guess where the difficulty comes in, and I can't confirm this isn't like news by any means, but I don't think the VFX was done till literally right before the episodes dropped, because
the
last 4 episodes weren't anywhere close to finished on the screeners. Like, the VFX were, it was people with little zombie heads. Like, the Ferris wheel was complete CG, like, gray screen with like a Ferris wheel moving around. And so, like, I don't think they were done until literally right before the episodes almost dropped. So I guess it probably will take that long, but still, you can get this shit done so much sooner if you have the stuff being filmed. Like, you don't want these people to look like it's a year apart, because these are minutes apart. Like, these scenes are happening at the same time. So I really think they should have gone straight into that. And it's kind of like, to sum that all up, I'm not saying I think season 3 will be bad or that people won't watch it. I'm saying I think they've made their job a lot tougher than it need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think TV's making their jobs in general tougher than it needs to be lately.
Yeah.
Just by, like you brought up Stranger Things. I'm still going to watch the last season for sure, but dude, it's been
So
15
long.
years.
Shit.
Like it's been, so long for that. It's just it's tough. It's tough. So I think it is a harder job to do overall. I don't think it'll stop people from watching, but I wouldn't be shocked if they watched the first 2 episodes. They're going to really have to lay it down on the first 2 episodes of
Yeah.
season 3, because otherwise I could see people leaving, which would be sad because it is, like you said, a great story to be told there. But if people are just like, I just don't care about these characters, I waited 2 years, like I'll watch it at a later time. And
Right.
you get the whole Walking Dead situation where people just stopped watching. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Next portion of this, diving back into the episode in itself, we get a big crucial game moment that is expanded on, but its core comes straight from the game, where Jesse and Ellie kind of have their little fight, their little separation. I'm going to save Tommy. I'm going to kill Abby. And Dina, she's recovering, she's chilling. They have the discussion like, hey, is Dina pregnant? And she's like, no, why do you think that? Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, she is. And Jesse reveals like he's met somebody new. He does think Ellie and Dina should be together. He doesn't have those same, he'll always care for her, always have love for her, but not in the same way that he knows that Ellie and Dina feel towards each other. And it kind of is like a moment, just for a moment, you remember that these are like some 19 and 20-year-olds where you're just having like a conversation where it's like, hey, I like her, but you also like her. Like, is this okay? And you kind of forget just for a second that this is a zombie apocalypse and they're on a murder revenge spree. And they're just a couple of young adults trying to figure out their feelings. But it turns when they disagree on what to do with Tommy, what to do with Abby. And obviously they find Tommy's location. I kind of buried the lead there. They find Tommy's location because they hear about a sniper up on their walkie-talkie. They realize that's Tommy, but also in this message, she realizes, wait a minute, this must be exactly where Abby is. So they go their separate ways. But Rob, it's really when I feel like you kind of get like the snap moment of like, yes, they're on the same team, but you don't really feel like they're on the same side when Jesse admits that he voted against Ellie. He was not one of the votes to that they should go after Joel's killer.
Yeah. The one thing I'll push back on you for is you saying that we forget that it's a zombie apocalypse. I actually found it very easy to forget that it was a zombie apocalypse because we haven't seen a zombie in about 4 episodes. So
I more so meant like forgot that like,
there's only 2. We had spores 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, no, I know what you meant. Yeah, I think it was revealing for Jesse. Like, I think this shows why should be in a leadership role. He understands the motivations and actions of those around him. He pegged exactly what Ellie wanted to do and how she really has always been just kind of out for herself. And that has never changed. She's selfish. She's been selfish since the beginning, with the exception of wanting to do the most selfless thing that one can do. But nobody else knows that, right? So like, although she did want to make the most selfless thing that anyone could do, the amount of people that know that was Joel. That was the one person who pretty much knew that. Possibly Tommy knows that as well. But other than that, everyone just sees her as this like selfish person. And I wonder if that's part of the character motivation where she was ready to do this selfless thing and wasn't able to. So now she's just overly selfish. And him pinpointing that shows like that he is the right person to lead in the future, that group, as he continues. He also made a selfless decision by not going with that girl to Mexico that he fell in love with. So I like that portion of it, and I'll leave it there because to me, right at that point, when they go their separate ways, is when the episode plummets for me.
I do like the way that Jesse laid it out. The exact quote is everything you do for you. And he just had finished saying, like, I was raised to care about other people, to put others first. And you're exactly right, Rob. That is what makes him a great leader. When we live in a world where, for the most part, the people that become leaders are the people with the biggest egos and the people who want people to follow them. That's who we see leading a lot right now, is the people who want followers because they want the spotlight, they want the attention, they want the power. But in reality, the best leaders are the ones who don't give a damn about themselves, or they care about themselves. They know how to take care of themselves, but they're putting others first. They want to lead because they say, I see a path that is better for everyone, and I want to help take you there. And I think that is the kind of leader that Jesse is. He does care about other people. That's why even though he voted against Ellie, he doesn't agree with her, he's still there to pull her ass out of the fire when he needs to because he cares. He's somebody who cares. What did you think about their conversation, Sean? Their separation and their motivation? A lot of shins, motivation, separation.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything you guys said. Like, it really, I like this is one of the things I was talking about, how it enhanced Jesse's character, because he's set forth as more of a leader within the series than he is in the show, at least more so. And I like where he took that stand. And to kind of add to Rob's point, like, I think what is driving Ellie is that she may know that she had this greater purpose, or so she thinks, to kind of save the world or whatever. And even though Joel took that away from her, she still loves Joel. And now that Joel is taken away, she's like, she just wants to like have anything. And that's like her motivation, is that it doesn't matter if this is right or wrong. It doesn't matter if I'm doing the same thing that happened to me. I need to get these people because they wronged me. And I think that's why, like, she'll see for a second, like, even when Dina's like, we need to go home, and she's like, yeah, we do. But when that clicks, she's like, wheel. And she's like, that's where Abby is. I need to go there. And I think it kind of adds to her downward spiral, which comes even more when she ends up getting to the aquarium. But I like what Rob said, because I think that does give more kind of credence to like why Ellie is doing this in the series context. In the game, she is very much more cold and vengeful. I don't know. Like, obviously I've liked the buildup of Ellie kind of not turning into a monster fully, but like realizing that she has this kind of love for violence she's like romanticized violence. And this is something we talked about last week's episode of how the whole point of the episode that like bookends it was like, when you have your own, I hope you do better than me. And Joel was successful in breaking that cycle of violence from parent to child, but he failed at bringing in the actual cycle of violence of what happened in life. What took his life is that everything he did leading up to that moment resulted in him dying. And in result, brought Ellie in direct contact of that cycle of violence. So he like succeeded in one way, but failed in another way. And it kind of makes that statement even more heartbreaking, especially knowing that's the night before he ends up getting killed, is that, he's like, and for people who know what happens in the game, it makes what happens with Ellie more heartbreaking too, knowing that she heard that sentiment from Joel, especially, is that for some reason she just can't let go of this vengeance, because Joel is like the one thing that was like her first love. You know what I mean? Like, and we saw that love all last episode. So it's like, she thinks that, and that's exactly what Abby thought too. Killing the person that did the thing that was the worst thing in her life will make things better. And I think that's a part of what could make season 3 hopefully really good, is that you realize it fucking doesn't at all. It just makes things worse. It doesn't make anything better. but it was a good conversation. I liked how it, was expanded from the game, and it was a nice little moment even in the bookstore too, with them talking about like what books they picked and how Jesse was like, you picked a better one than me and stuff like that. That was and the addition of Jesse talking about like that girl he like fell in love with. He's like, obviously I love Dina, but that was like the love you guys have, is what we had and stuff like that. So yeah, go Jesse.
The symbolism on that book is really great as well. And I don't know if a lot of people catch that one, but that was like one of my favorite books as a kid. So I remember it. It's called There's a Monster at the End of This Book.
Mhm.
Were you guys familiar with that book?
Yeah, we couldn't find the original, but my daughter has. I think there's still a monster at the end of this book.
Oh.
So the context of that book is, as you're reading through it, it's Grover. And Grover is basically every page you go to, he's like, don't go to the end of this book. There's a monster at the end of it. And then you'll flip the page and he's trying to basically block you from churning the page, whether it was like putting a brick wall up, and then the next page you would turn, it would be the brick wall be broken down. And he's continually trying to tell you not to go to the end of the book because there's a monster at the end of the book. Well, the monster at the end of the book was Grover. So there's a lot of symbolism there where, like, you can put Ellie in the shoes of Grover there, where she's like, there's a monster at the end of this journey, but the monster at the end of the journey could possibly be her, right? So I thought that was some pretty good symbolism that they put in there that I'm not sure everyone would get, because I'm not sure. I mean, I'm old AF, so I'm not sure how much of that book stayed out there. So I just figured I'd throw that in there.
That's a great catch.
Great catch. And Rob, I'll keep it for you for the next part, which, as you described, is kind of where the episode starts going downhill a little bit for you, because we get these two separated and they both have this clear path of what they're going to be doing. But it does get a little convoluted as Ellie gets captured by the W.L.F. are rolling out. She's trying to avoid them. She ends up getting captured by the Scars. And we get this moment that I feel like if this happened 2 episodes ago would have been a lot more nerve-wracking for me. But at this point, it was almost a little bit of like, okay, but we got to get where we're going to now.
Right.
This is the dumbest thing they've done in the entire series. Was this, like, there's other stuff I don't like that we're going to talk about, but this scene is the dumbest shit they've done in this entire series so far. To have her captured on this island by the Scars, who start to prep her to disembowel her, right? And because a fight breaks out on the other side of the island, they just let her go. They just let her go, right? Like, they're just like, just leave her. You're like, dude, they are brutal, bloodthirsty. That's how they've been depicted for most of the show so far. They would never just leave her there. They might not finish the disemboweling, but they would cut her throat and leave her and then go to the fight. They're going to leave an adversary behind them to ambush them from behind. Like, what are we doing? Like, this scene is unnecessary, not needed, dumb. And I was like, dude, come on, man. Like, this is, there's no flow to the story with this. It's terrible all around. Like, I don't know what you're trying to show me here. Like, there's no point to it, unless you guys have something that I missed on this scene. I just felt like it was shoehorned in and just had no reason to be there.
I don't have any additional point of why it was necessary. I don't feel as strongly, because it was almost, to me, just a bit of like you're running through the fire and you burned your foot moment of like, yep, this is chaos and you're in it. But at the same time, I do agree with you of how she got out was kind of foolish, and the scene as a whole felt unnecessary. It kind of just felt like they were adding plot armor to Ellie that didn't need to be there.
Yeah. The only thing I could think of is that they're going to mirror a certain scene that comes in season 3, but I don't think it's absolutely needed. And the way a certain character gets out of a similar scenario makes way more sense than what happened here. Because it takes what everything you said was stupid and actually addresses those things into a way where you're like, oh yeah, this all makes sense of why this is happening. And that's the only reason I can think of why they added it. Or I guess the only other thing than that is that the reason they leave is connected to the W.L.F stuff. And I feel like they're trying to overtly connect things too much, maybe. But again, I don't think it's really needed regardless,
Or
Carlos
make
chat.
there more urgency, right? Like just have the wolves already on the island so that they have to leave her because they have to get there right now.
Right.
Right. Like they're close. Like they don't have time to deal with this.
Yeah.
Which was not the feeling you get at all in this scene.
No.
Yeah, I agree. Carlos agrees with your point, Sean, in chat, saying the only reason that scene exists is to kind of bridge the gap between Ellie and Abby's stories in season 3, and to just go, like, ooh, this is happening at the same time, and now we're going to see it from the other side. But I don't think they did a very good job of it at the end of the day. What I will say it does is kind of the revert, and we already had these moments where we saw the disembowelments, but we first see we first see Abby in like a moment in this season, not in the game, but in this season, we see her as like we're feeling for her because she just had loss. And we are introduced to her and feel empathy for her before she does this big, terrible thing that we want to hate her for. Maybe this provides almost the reverse of that for the character that will be introduced in the next season of, look how terrible these scars are. Look how terrible the Seraphites are. They're horrible. They're savages. And then you get to know some of them, and you get to maybe feel the opposite side of what we got with Abby. But again, I'm just trying to think of something on the fly and justify not actually. These aren't thoughts I had by any means as I was watching.
Yeah. I think they easily could have, if they had the same situation and say they had like infected come in or something and paired it with something, and they're like, leave her for the demons or something like that. Like just like a small thing that would have taken like 2 seconds. Like that would have added more kind of clarity to this, if that was their goal, to give that overlap, which I'm sure it was, and sure to like mirror a certain scene that's going to come in season 3, but just add a little bit more to make it more like what Rob said, like believable in a narrative sense for what the rules you've already set in this world. Like he's totally right. Like they wouldn't just leave her. They would have just gutted her and then left her. It would have taken an extra 2 seconds, or whatever. It wouldn't, it added some other level of urgency to the situation, would have just changed it and made it so people were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. And again, just because we know what's coming, like with other characters, they need to approach this like the viewers don't know what's coming.
Exactly.
And they don't. And if that is the case, they do a F level job here with that. Like it's just, you shouldn't have to wait 2 years for a callback like this for something that doesn't make sense. If it made sense, sure. But when it doesn't make sense, because people are going to forget, right? Like you're going to forget. And the only way you're going to remember is by giving one of those spoiler previously on screens that I refuse to watch. So I just think it was overall bad.
We go straight from this little encounter to Ellie finishing her trip, trying to get to the aquarium, trying to find Abby. She does not find Abby, but she finds 2 of her associates, 2 of her friends. She sees Owen, she sees Mel, and we get the scene. The beginnings of the street scene are straight out of the video game as she's kind of creeping up in on them. Owen says to Mel that she's just going to go ahead and kill them anyways. And Ellie's like, no, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not you. I'm better than you. Essentially, she thinks that these are the villains. And she is still, despite knowing she kind of crossed the line that she had never crossed before to that extent with Nora in previous episodes, she still believes she's the hero of this story. She believes she is doing getting justice. And I don't know if she truly believes it, but she's trying to convince herself. She's trying to convince herself, not them, that she is the hero of this story and she is getting justice for Joel and not just satisfying her own selfish desires. And so she's straight up, Owen's not helping, bam, shoots him. And if I'm not mistaken, Sean, this is a pretty big change because she does not, I thought in the game she just goes ahead and shoots Mel. And in this one, she accidentally shoots Mel because the bullet went right through Owen's neck and right into Mel. And Mel's not just Mel. Mel is carrying a little baby. And her first thought, being the doctor that she is and the, I think, closest to a good person of that group, like closest to like a kind-hearted, moral person is Mel. And she just immediately says, she doesn't care if she's dying. She says, please take this baby out of me. Get this baby out of me so it can live. And she doesn't. She doesn't do it. This to me is since the story is being told differently than the game and it's not just a one-track vengeance train, this to me is like the moment of, Ellie, you're broken and you just went past the point of no return.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually thought this change was so insanely brutal because already the I'm a dad, Ellie being stoked that she was gonna have a family, Dina's pregnant. After that happened, I was like, I know exactly why they did it. And it was because of this moment, because I knew this moment was coming. But to have Mel die, because in the game, it's more of like an act of self-defense. Mel comes at her with a knife after she shoots Owen, and she ends up stabbing her in the throat. And as Owen is dying, he's like, she's pregnant. And then unzips the coat, finds out she's pregnant, completely loses it. I feel like this is so much more traumatic to the fact that she's like, oh man, I killed this pregnant woman. I didn't mean to. And now she's begging me to perform this impromptu C-section. That is insane. So insane to even think about. I was like, you sick and twisted individuals to make a change like this. That is wild. And I'm sure it was Craig Mazin because I feel like he's always the one that makes these little adjustments that are just a little more deranged than what Neil Druckmann did. As I've been listening to the companion podcasts and stuff like that, it seems like it's always Craig that comes up with it. But I know these last two episodes were written by Craig, Neil, and Haley and Neil co-wrote Last of Us Part 2. So I know they had more say. I don't know how that goes in the hierarchy of show making. I know Neil's a show runner and producer and all that stuff. So who knows what goes into that. But I thought it was insanely brutal and pretty I thought it was at first watch. I was like, that feels a lot different than the game. Then I went and rewatched the cutscene and I was like, oh wow, it actually is pretty close until it gets to the killing moment. And the only difference is that Ellie has the map, which she hasn't had the map in the series. So that was the big change of Owen trying to save the day. But yeah, brutal, insanely brutal. And that's another thing I'm wondering from non-game players is that, I mean, I guess we got this through the game too, is we don't know these people at all. And then right after the fact, we start to learn about them. So I guess I am wondering how that's going to play out in a series too, because it works pretty well in the game, but in the game, you're still playing at this point. It's not like you have to wait a few years to learn about these characters. You learn about them right away if you're, continuously playing the game. So that's one thing I am wondering how that goes for sure.
The part I liked about this change is when it's self-defense and somebody's charging at you with a knife, it is easier to continue the lie of, I'm doing this for justice, I'm doing this for Joel, I'm not doing it for my own selfish reasons. Right. You have no choice but to acknowledge it in this situation of I did that. It was because of my decision, and even though I didn't mean to, this is still another case of, why did Joel die? Because of all his decisions that led to this moment. All the bad shit he did, it's now time to pay the piper. That was a little bit of the case of this for Ellie to me as well, of She kills Owen because she thinks, all right, Owen's a bad guy. I'm doing what I got to do. There's no justification of this. You fucked up, and now both of them are on the ground paying the are paying for your decisions, and you're gonna have to do the exact same thing. Rob, what did you think?
So I have a completely different take than you guys on this one. I think this is bad overall. Like I think this is a terrible change. And I'm on record. I'm not one of those guys that's pounding the table because they change everything from the game. I like a lot of the changes that they have made. For the most part, there's a few here and there that were minor that I didn't love. I think we went over the Tommy thing. I didn't love the reasoning that they brought Tommy to Seattle versus the game, but it's kind of minor in the grand scheme of things. This, I think, I have the opposite take on this, where I think the show is actually sanitizing Ellie stuff, like how she actually finishes her in that episode a couple weeks ago, right? They sort of cut away and you just hear about it. You do it in the game. So you see the lengths that she's willing to go with Nora. Like, and which I think is a huge part of the story. And this, I think that they are giving a reason to help the audience keep her as a protagonist. Yes, she shot Mel, but it wasn't on purpose. It was an accident. She was shooting Owen. They can understand that. They can justify that in their head. Whereas I think, even if though in the game there was a struggle, she still made a conscious decision to shoot her. And I think it's such a pivotal moment in the game and in the story of what Ellie is supposed to be, where she finally has that breakdown because she realizes that she's gone too far and she's become such a monster with no justification, that I hated this change. And I feel like when you can chalk it up as an accident rather than an action, then I think it just sort of sanitizes it a little bit.
Sean?
It's a fair. I mean, I don't think either opinion is wrong. It's a good point, though. It is a good point. I just see as, even if it is an accident, it's still a reaction of her decision to do this at all. You know, like regardless, she's still at fault for it. And I don't think she's gonna I don't think there's gonna be any like wave of forgiveness. And I like that she was still kind of like catatonic at the end, and we still have the Jesse and Tommy come to kind of get her out of there. Because at first I thought they weren't going to show up, and I thought she was going to get out of there by herself, which I would have hated. That makes no sense. She should be like beside herself, absolutely messed up. And I think that's what, because it's an accident, I think that kind of makes it a little worse, because you know, it's like a reaction of what's happening. Yes, she's trying to defend herself against Owen. Mel gets caught in the crossfire, but I still think the reaction is still the same, because she's realizing what she did has gone too far, regardless of either scenario. But you make a very valid point, and I can see why you would think that, for sure. I saw it as like, yeah, it's an accident, but still, like the end goal feels the same to me. Whereas like she fucked up, like irrevocably bad. As bad as she thinks Abby is for what she did, she just took away 2 lives, 3 technically, but end the moment with Mel. And like it's kind of like the other parallel where it's Jesse is choosing life over death, as in he doesn't want to cause death, he wants to cause life. And Ellie tried to argue that, being like, they dragged away a kid, but his conscious mind is being like, yeah, what are we going to do? Step our foot in the middle of this war and get all of us killed? That doesn't make any sense. So it's this weird like line she's towing, and I think that's the final straw to fall her off that line, to be like, in her head she's probably like, Jesse was right. I should have went with her to get Tommy. What did this do for me? Nothing. Now I have 2 more people and an unborn baby dead because of my actions, because I thought I needed to get revenge, because that's going to make everything better. But no, it turned her into this person, there is no coming back from that, but you make a very good point with that, the sanitization of the death for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the character. Like, sorry, TJ.
I was going to say Carlos agrees with you, Rob.
Yeah, it doesn't change like the character like feelings as much as what they're doing to the audience feelings, right? Where they're keeping,
for sure.
And that's what I don't like is you're leading the audience down a path of excuses when you didn't have to. Like you could like the game doesn't give you the excuses, in my opinion. You see the brutal nature of her. You see that arc. Has she gone too far to be redeemed? And that's sort of the nature of it. And I feel like they are giving you outs on the show because they don't want to get people to stop watching. And that was my biggest problem with it, where it's like, instead of putting your foot on the gas, you put your foot on the brake. And I don't like when shows do that. I actually was talking to Dave, who was in the chat earlier, about this because he's a show watcher. He's not a game player. So we were talking about sort of this moment, and he brought up a great point where it's like, he likes shows that doesn't care what the audience thinks, where they do exactly what they want to do and they don't worry about the fallout from what the audience says to them. First half of Game of Thrones was the example. Like, they didn't care what the audience was going to say. They just did it. Right. And I think that there was it felt like there was fear in losing the audience here. And I don't like that, because I think that if that's the case now, then you're going to lose your fastball later even more. So that is my bigger concern overall. And that's why I said this was a good, close to great season for me. This wasn't a series killer for me, but it really bums me out knowing that they might cave to not wanting to lose their audience by making a choice here or there.
Where I'll push back on that is from the audience perspective of like not wanting to, upset them too much. I actually think it's going to make a specific future. This is hard to talk about without spoiling anything. I think it'll make, by not having her go full on, I'm a demon who only cares about revenge now. Woo! Kill, 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 kill. Angry, angry, angry all the time. I think it will make a very specific moment in the future hit even harder and make you even more pissed at Ellie, because we haven't already put her down that path so early. And it again kind of comes back to, it's because I think that their plan is a 4-season television show, which I'm not going to be swaying you in this argument because you didn't like that idea anyways. But if they're planning on having that scene in season 4, where Ellie and Dina are at a house and Dina doesn't like the plan that Ellie's going to do, that to me will be even more of a betrayal and hurt even more, because the audience hasn't given up on Ellie yet. At this point in the story, the audience is still going, Ellie, you're good. Come on. You fucked up, but it was an accident. They still want her to ultimately be happy ending story. I think if it is not that part is going to hit even harder down the line because of the way they've told this. But again, I think this is a matter of an opinion thing as opposed to anything else. The one other thing I wanted to touch on about kind of Ellie's specific perspective in terms of the reason I like it is, I think when somebody decides to do something, even if it's a bad thing, for the most part, they've already created the justification in their head of, well, they deserved it. They had it coming. I wanted to do it, and I was right because I already thought about this. Whereas because it was an accident, that unintended consequence, I think it, at least for me, it's like when I want to do something, even if I know it's going to cause pain to somebody, if I thought it was a good decision, then I can live with it. I don't really do that very often. I don't have examples of it, but whereas if I accidentally hurt someone, I feel a lot worse about it because I did not want to do that. I didn't want them to hurt. And so it brings me to a darker place than I was otherwise. But that doesn't impact the audience's perspective at all, like you were talking about, Rob. Any other points on that? I'll throw it back to you before I move on to the next thing.
Just to clarify, I think the story is about how far can you go and still be redeemable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my fear, right? Like, because that turn is supposed to happen right after this scene where she does have the breakdown, and you're supposed to start to go through those murky waters there. So that's my concern, right? There's reasons like Carlos brings up some stuff in the comments about her not taking the lives of certain animals in the show because of this, and I agree with that. I'm glad they didn't do that, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I needed that, but
nope.
But because you're already losing some of that, right? I worry about the sanitation of the character a little bit. I understand your point about the accident, but to push back a little bit, if you went to somebody and talked about this, say you went to your wife, right? And you were like, I did this, I didn't mean to do it. She's going to be like, oh, well, it happened, but this wasn't your intent. Like they're going to talk you through it. Whereas like, I did this, I meant to do it. And then they're going to be like, well, you made the decision, man. Now you got to live with it. Right. Like that's the difference, where if it's an accident, somebody's going to talk to you and tell you, maybe it was a little bit your fault, but it wasn't your intent. It was an accident. You shouldn't beat yourself up over it. You should forgive yourself. And they're going to keep talking you through it in that aspect. So that's what they're doing with the audience, right? Where the audience is forgiving her already. Whereas instead of being like, that was your choice. You did this. You went there on your own. You had a clear path to not go there. You could have went to Tommy. And I think that's the difference. I understand the perspective you're giving. I don't think it works in terms of the audience. Whereas it might work for the character, it doesn't work for what we should be feeling as an audience.
That's a really great point, because that is the perspective I was thinking it was from the character perspective. But it's, if somebody says to you, it's like, yes, they died, but I did not mean to do it. You're not judging them in the same way that if they did mean to do that. So I think that is a really, really great point. And she's kind of beginning her breakdown, her almost like not breakdown as much as shock of like, what the fuck just happened, as Tommy and Jesse come in. They save the day. I just love Tommy so much more in this show than I do the game. Tommy and Dina are really the two biggest improvements for me. And I love just getting to see him back, come in, guns blazing, ready to save her life. He's there because that's his niece, right? That's his family. Joel, yes, he lost his brother, but Ellie is part of that family now too. And so I do love that little mini moment we get between them, but it really doesn't last long. Really doesn't last long, Sean. We get back to the theater. We go aquarium. We go theater. And we are already back to the chaos. Bam. Abby is back. And in one of the... I'll let you kind of do the breakdown, but and say what happened, Sean. But I have to say, when Abby comes in there and fires a gun, it is in the show and the game, the quickest, most what the fuck did that actually just happen character deaths I have ever seen.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. That's the thing that makes it so chaotic, is in both mediums, you barely even have time to react to it. You're just like, wait, what just happened? What is going on? And yeah, they showed this in the preview. They've been doing trailers for they do a lot of the big HBO shows, but they have like the trailer for the next episode. And I saw the scene where Jesse was running, and I was like, And they had a nice conversation before that, kind of where Jesse, I wouldn't say comes around, but kind of was like, when he was like, oh, maybe Tommy forced me, after Ellie thanked him for coming to, like, he obviously knew where Ellie was going. So he relayed that information to Tommy. He's like, oh, maybe Tommy made me. And he's like, did you really? No, he didn't. He's like, if I was in that position, I would like to think you would set the world on fire to come for me. I thought that was a really nice moment. Only to juxtapose with him getting shot square in the face 2 seconds later. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. The thing I love about this scene is, and in both instances, is we come back to this scene, as you can probably imagine with how this episode ends. We're going to see this from a completely different perspective. And seeing it from the second perspective is such a wild trip coming at it from this, because it's totally different. And I don't know. I love Caitlin Dever as Abby. I think she is so intense, and as she should be. Abby is a very intense character, as fans will get to learn if they tune in for season 3. There is much more to her than that, for sure. And we've seen a little bit. We've seen her in pain, dealing with grief, for sure. But we're going to get a lot more of that and a lot more of her story. And that's what makes me the most excited for season 3, other than I know the story is incredible and that arc is pretty damn amazing. It is ballsy, and they are on an uphill battle. Just like you guys said, 100%. It's a lot to ask. It's a very ballsy narrative choice. And it was in the game too. 1,000%. I remember playing the game and being like, what is this? But, sometimes curiosity gets the best of you. And a lot of the times it pays off. Because I think some of the best storytelling is the boldest. So we'll see how that pays off as we get there. But I remember TJ saying, I was like, I figured it would end in the theater scene. And he said the season ends in a way that's surprising. And it does. And I think a lot of people said the ending, or not a lot of people, I've seen a few people say they didn't like the ending, which I can get. But I also think we live in an era where people forget like what TV is. And I think it's a great ending for TV, to tee up what's coming, but to end in a like, wait, what did I just watch? You don't know what happens to Ellie. You're probably in shock, wondering if Jesse is actually dead. What happens to Tommy after? And now you're like, wait, so what did Abby go through these 3 days? And that's going to be the story they kind of usher into it. So I kind of like that they left the fans of, not, I guess, of both, but mostly the general audience, which, to Rob's point, and that's what I've been trying to tell game players, is that they are producing this mostly for people who have no idea what this is. Of course, they want game players to love it too, but this is for the mass general audience. And that's how this should be approached. They shouldn't have approached this to be like, we need to appease the game players, because that's the exact wrong approach. The viewership of the show compared to people who play the game is fractions. They're reaching so many more people with this series. So they need to approach it in a way. And like we both brought up, there's ways they could have done that a little better. It's a similar thing I had to a problem with Ahsoka. It's like, if you're a Rebels fan, everything made sense. If you've never watched Rebels, that show was probably so confusing. And that's a problem with the show overall. And I think they did a good job most of the time, but there's definitely times where it was lacking. But I think the way they ended it was a good way to leave people wondering enough to be interested to see where it goes. I don't think there could have been a better way, because if they just cut to black, I mean, maybe, but I think they needed to tee up and kind of tease what the next season would be. Because if it just fades to black and then starts at Abby, I think that whiplash is way harder. So I like that they ended with that one little scene to kind of edge into what season 3 is going to be. Otherwise, it would have felt like probably too jarring, I think. Maybe.
I won't harp on this because we've already talked about it a lot earlier on in the show, but I think that was a absolute perfect place to end. If the next season was starting 9 months from now, or in September next year,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, it's
right.
TV. It's exactly like you said. Give me that cliffhanger that it ends on, because I want to be itching for that next season so I can find out what happens next.
Right.
But unless there's a long gap. When there is a long gap, I like to be able to conclude my story and then come back and start a new story so that I don't have to feel like, hey, wait, what happened again? So I got to rewatch this whole season before I start the next one. It was kind of how I felt about Andor, and the reason why I wasn't quite as high on it as a lot of people, because I felt like every time they gave us that 1 year gap, I had to catch up on what happened in that year. You know, I was still kind of wondering, well, like what happened with the rest of the story? And so this is a real life gap, not a time gap within the show. But I very much I know that 2 years from now I'm going to be like, okay, how did we? Even though I played the game twice and I've watched the show, I'm going to get back here and be like, wait, what brought us here again? Just because it's so far down the line. And I do think the cliffhanger ending doesn't hit as hard when you have to wait that long. Rob, what do you think of not just like the title card conclusion to this episode, but meeting back up at the theater, bang, Jesse's gone. Ellie is on the floor pleading with Abby to not kill Tommy, and she delivers an impeccable line from Caitlin Dever. I let you live and you wasted it.
Yeah. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the death of Jesse, because that was one thing that I saw people sort of complaining about. And I'm glad they didn't change that. I love the suddenness of it because it is so jarring. It is so unlike, because if you're left to your own devices, right? A lot of people would write that scene where they run into the theater. She shoots Jesse in the leg. She holds him. She has the gun to his head. The conversation happens. It ends with the bullet, with the gun firing, and you know he's dead. But it gets drawn out longer. You get the camera shot of him looking, you know, at Tina. Yeah,
that moment.
It works sometimes. Like I'm not like, but it's so common.
You also just had like an extreme version of that with Joel earlier, right? So it's like it's a total contrast.
Great point. That's actually a phenomenal point. So yes, I love the suddenness of it because that's what would probably happen, right? Like
you run through the door, you'd shoot at the people coming through the door.
Right. and just drop because you got shot in the face. It's just like boom, it's that quick, it's that sudden. That's what death is in this situation, unfortunately. But I'm glad they didn't change that because it really impacts everything. It impacts the reactions from Ellie, because not only do we not understand what's really happening, the characters don't really understand what's happening. Everything's chaos. And this is where I think this is why I don't like some of the changes they made with Ellie, because she is starting her like redemption arc sort of after she's done these terrible things. And now she just gets thrown right back into the cycle, right? Before she's even able to complete that. So I like the way they did it overall. I think it's really good. I think you make the best point of the entire show, TJ, where now we have to wait 2 years for that. And we actually might have to wait 4 years before we move beyond this point.
Right.
And you're just asking. I mean, I don't think so. I think they'll get us beyond this point in season 3. But there is a chance that they just bookend both seasons ending here, which I think would be a mistake. I think it's a mistake. To TJ's point, you're asking a lot out of your audience at that point. You're just asking so much from your audience for 4 years. You know, we're talking 2029, right? Like that 4 years is a long time. So I like it overall, but I'm with TJ on this. I think we're asking our audience a lot going forward.
Could they stick the landing? Absolutely. But they're putting themselves in a position where it goes, you have no choice but to stick the landing. If you're going to make us wait, it better be worth it.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree.
I will say the climax of the theater is like would make for a very good season 3 finale or finale in general. And I can see that working super well because it is That's a wild segment. I kind of like forgot about it, and then I ended up like I was like, oh, I think it popped up on my YouTube, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch this because I don't really remember it fully. And I was like, wow, this scene is because there's so many things you forget about, like after Abby's kind of 3-day journey and the way they get to that situation that make it hit so much harder, knowing both sides of the story and it finally culminating to like one massive kind of juggernaut of an ending. So I'm excited to see that, but I am totally agreement. I wish they were filming it like right now, like how Daredevil is. Like, you know, they're filming season 2 right now, so it comes out next year. And I like that a lot of streaming shows like need to get better at that. Like The Pit is going to be doing it a season a year. The Bear has been doing it a season a year. And I feel like that needs to be kind of the marker. I guess when it shows like, I guess the boys can kind of get away with it when now that they have Gen V, they can kind of do like, I mean, I know it's ending after the next season, but it's kind of worked out where it's been like season of the boys next year. There's a season of Gen V. It's not the same thing, but it's in the same world. And some of the characters kind of overlap. So it's like a nice gap bridger for that. But it is a hard thing. And I think, especially in a time when there's so much good TV out there. I think Severance is probably going to be, because I don't even think they've announced when they're filming. At least The Last of Us is like, yeah, we're going to film next year, which sucks. But I don't think Severance is even announced when they're filming. And it's like they're coming off.
They probably already are. Like that's one of those things where it's like they haven't announced anything except for Ben Stiller essentially saying like our goal is to release the next season next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I hope that happens because I think they need to. It's the same thing with this. Like they need to capitalize on the hype they have, and not let it. Because there's so many good shows either returning or surprise shows. Like The Pit was probably on no one's radar. It's one of the best shows of the year. You know, Paradise was probably on no one's radar. Everyone loves that show too. So it's like you have to account for those things. And like the Paradise is already filming. Like. And they got renewed like midway through the season. So it's like, it's almost like, do you really have an excuse? I get some of these people are in high demand and I'm sure it's hard to like get.
There's no Pedro anymore. You can film whenever you want. Nobody else is in anything.
Isabela Merced is in everything.
Isabela Merced is in everything right now. But like,
but at the same time, I don't, they're not going to be in a lot of season 3.
Yeah.
Spoiler guys, you know, like Ellie's camp probably isn't going to be in a lot of season 3. Is going to be the inverse of this season where you don't see a lot of Abby's crew. You see a lot of Ellie's perspective. It's going to be the exact opposite. So it's going to be mostly, but I mean, that's a lie. Danny Ramirez is an Avenger. Tati Gabrielle is also in everything.
And
so
in the midst of making the next Naughty Dog game.
That too, you know, like Danny Ramirez is literally in London filming an Avengers movie right now.
Yeah.
So I guess there is some schedule conflicts with Abby's crew too. I don't know. Like Caitlin Deaver seems pretty busy too. Not as a level as like Danny Ramirez or something like that, but she's a pretty sought out talent, I guess. She's kind of in more indie stuff, but I totally agree. Like I
need Falcon for a big fight again, like against Dr. Doom, and so they can just loan him to the show and say film whenever you want.
It's just, like I know they said they're like we made this with the hope that they would get season 3, but they didn't quite know. But they definitely probably should have filmed these back to back, like just straight up.
They knew.
Like
they knew they were.
I mean, the show was a massive hit. It was Emmy nominated, won at least one Emmy. I know Nick Offerman won an Emmy, right? So it's like, did they think it was just gonna blow up and die, and they were not gonna get renewed for a season 3? Like the HBO like CEO is out, like, yeah, we're gonna whatever they want. Basically, we're gonna give it to them. So it's like they should have just filmed them, because I think if they got these two out, you know, year to year, if you had to wait 2 years for season 4, maybe it would have been a hit. But I think that would have made a little more sense, because at least this 3-day story would have been concluded. Because the last part is kind of an epilogue, sort of. It is kind of it's very attached to the narrative, but it's a very different part of the story. So that I could see being away, but I totally agree. It sucks. It's going to be 2 years. I wish it would come out next year. So
you don't want this to be a House of the Dragon situation, at least from everything that I've seen, where people are just like, whatever, man. It comes out, cool. If it doesn't come out, I don't care. Like, it's just, that's sort of where I've seen that show go.
I know Carlos said he's like, they covered the 3 days and 3 episodes, right? I think we can catch up with the story by episode 4. But there is the whole thing of, we had a season of Ellie before we got to season 2 to kind of lay the groundwork of Ellie as a character. They're going to do that with Abby too. There's flashbacks with Abby. They're going to build up Abby more in that stuff too. And that's why they're like, why are they doing this? You went through the 3 days and 3 episodes. And I was like, yes, but you have to build the groundwork of Abby, of Abby's past, of the Fireflies, and kind of how they got to Seattle in the first place. So there's all of that extra stuff I feel like people are forgetting, or maybe not accounting for, not forgetting about, but not accounting for. So there's a lot more groundwork they have to do in the Abby level, just from that standpoint, where they don't have what they need to give it to common ground with Ellie, as well as tell the 3-story day thing.
In addition to Abby's story, like, we have not met the 3rd biggest character in the game.
Yeah.
Like, you could argue Dina is the number 3 character in the game, but there's a full other character that plays probably the biggest role of anyone not named Ellie and Abby in this movie, in this project, and we haven't even met them yet. We haven't even seen 100%. Them. And so there's definitely still a whole lot coming in that. Rob, any final thoughts on the season, any theories for season 3, as well as let us know where we can find your podcast and on socials?
Sure. I think I'm just going to reiterate that this was a good season that bordered on great at some points and really didn't stick the landing for me overall. I mean, the biggest points being that one scene that just didn't need to be there. Just absolutely killed me as I was watching it, because I literally put my hands up. I'm like, then why did we do this? Why did we do this? If she gets to walk away, like, oh, whatever. And then I think that the sanitation of Ellie a little bit worries me for the future, but I'm still hopeful. I'm not trying to be a downer, but I do have some red flags. And on socials, you can catch me at King Coakley, but more importantly, Hometown Ghost Stories, the podcast, the YouTube channel. Look for Hometown Ghost Stories wherever you listen to shows, or on YouTube, and you can find us there.
Check it out if you are a fan of spooky content. But also, I got to join the podcast for my first time a couple weeks ago, and really, really great community you guys have over there with the live shows in the chat and on socials. So definitely check it out. It's a good time. It's a bunch of good people over there. One last final point from me on the series. I do think, one of my favorite shows of all time, I always talk about it on Whatcha, Watchin', it's Avatar: The Last Airbender. And there's a character by the name of Prince Zuko, who has what is considered to be the best, if not one of the very best redemption arcs in all of media. And I've been listening to the Rewatch podcast, and they talk about how a lot of people started seeing that redemption arc coming by the mid-second season. And so they had a full-on point where they go, as he's redeeming himself, they have a point where he full-on reverts back to his old self, and you get crushed because you thought he was about to be redeemed, and he goes the opposite direction. I think we're going to get the reverse of that with Ellie in what will eventually be the 4th season of this show, where people are wanting to cheer for her, or no, we still can. It was an accident. This is still a good character, a good person, only for them to be devastated later on when she makes some certain decisions. Sean, final thoughts. Where can people find you on socials? Where can they find your performance with the insane clown posse?
Dude, I wish I was up there spraying the crowd with Fago, but maybe one day. Again, really, really good season of television. I think it's up there with some of the best this year. I don't think it is the best. I would say it's probably going to be in my top 10 by the end of the year. We'll see what else comes out. A lot of good TV already, and I've watched a ton of it. There's some good stuff I can't wait to talk about when it comes out in a month or so. I think some going to be some real big surprises. But you can find my writings at collider.com. I just put up a Last of Us season 2 ending explained. If you're not a game player and whiplash by that ending, I break down the whole episode basically, so you can go check that out. I'll have some more reviews coming out in agesofFandom.com. Got one coming next week, so stay tuned for that. I have an interview dropping tomorrow, I believe, so make sure you check that out when that drops here on this nice little YouTube channel, and follow me at Metalcore Nerds wherever you're on socials. And you can see the ICP photo gallery at metalcorenerds.com probably this week sometime.
That'll do it for this week's show. We will be back live later this week on Thursday for the Comic Corner, where Damon AF and Fat Thor break down all the week's releases and give you some reviews of their favorite comics. And sometime this week, I don't know what day yet, but this is why you want to hit the like button, subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and hit that notification bell so you don't ever miss out on when we're going live. We will have one other show this week, just still working out the final dates. As Sean mentioned, this has been an absolute stupid year for television so far, between The Last of Us, Andor, for maybe not quite the same level of quality, but for our nerdy friends, Daredevil Born Again, Paradise, Severance, The Pit, The Rehearsal. Lots and lots and lots of television that is going to be competing at the end of the year for some Emmys. And so we are going to do, I don't know the format yet. Might be a draft, might be a ranking, but some kind of mid-year television review breakdown this week as well. I'll bring Sean on for it because we don't know anybody who watches more television than he does. We'll kick off Damon because he's too busy reading comic books to watch any TV, and we'll get it done. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this week. We will see you next time. On behalf of myself, Sean, and Rob, peace.